Hello there and welcome to All 24 News World News Program. I'm your host, Grifa Zachary, and up next are the top stories. In Gaza, the occupation bombs displaced persons dance in Al-Zawahira and intensified strikes on Al-Nusayrat and Jabalia. Coming up next, in Sudan, Al-Burhan declares Khartoum free as the army seizes key areas, including the international airport, vowing to eliminate the rapid support forces. Also in our news, Zelensky says Moscow's latest attack proves Russia isn't serious about peace, while the Kremlin hails progress in U.S. negotiations over the Black Sea. Stay with us for the details shortly. Hello again and welcome back to the program. It's great to have you with us tonight. We begin in Gaza, where one massacre barely ends before another one, even more brutal, begins. Since the ceasefire was shattered, the death toll has soared past 800, with hospitals overwhelmed and supplies running dangerously low. Overnight, Zionist airstrikes pounded central and northern Gaza, killing at least 11 Palestinians. In Al-Zawahira, families sheltering in makeshift tents were hit. In Nusayrat, a food distribution center near Al-Qassam Mosque was bombed, leaving 5 dead. Another strike on civilians and the camp claimed 4 more lives. One of the deadliest attacks struck Jabalia al-Balad. 11 people were killed there, including 8 from a Najjar family, half of them children. With no proper equipment, rescue teams dug through the rubble by hand, pulling out a mother and her 4 kids. Elsewhere, the onslaught continued. A Palestinian was killed in Beit Lahia, a child in El Bureij, and 2 more in Khan Yunis. In Rafah, a drone strike claimed the life of 36-year-old Omar Hamad as Zionist drones hovered over the city.
In the Bayrat Halawi area on the Old Gaza Street, what was the sin of these torn bodies and scattered limbs in the middle of the night, in the final days of Ramadan? What was the sin of a 6-month-old baby? What did they do to the occupation? Torn into pieces. What did they do? Where's the Arab nation, the nation of Muhammad? God will hold them accountable tomorrow. Wake up, Muslims. God will hold them accountable and punish them. Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil.
Similarly, in the past 24 hours alone, 39 more lives were lost and 124 others wounded. 1 body was pulled from the rubble, a grim reminder of the massive destruction. Since March 18th, the death toll has soared to 830, with nearly 1,800 injured. Hospitals are at breaking point, supplies are running dry, and the humanitarian crisis is spiraling out of control. In a related note, Gaza's hospitals are running out of fuel and the consequences could be catastrophic. The Palestinian Ministry of Health warns that if generators shut down, every patient in intensive care units will perish. Munir al-Barash, the ministry's Director General, says fuel supplies won't last more than 10 days, pushing the healthcare system to the edge. With 80% of patients unable to find medication, doctors are fearing the worst. Meanwhile, dozens of Palestinian journalists in Gaza took to the streets in protest, condemning Zionist forces for targeting media workers on the job. Demonstrators urged international institutions to step in and hold the entity accountable, stressing that global silence only fuels further attacks on journalists.
The truth about the points from journalists from the first day of the aggression and the targeting of journalists, I was keen to monitor all the golden points of repercussions and points even before the 7th. The force filed lawsuits with the International Criminal Court against the targeting of journalists Shireen Abu Aqla, Asma al-Muttaja, and Ahmed Abu Hussein. The actions are increasing from now on. From here, we demand that the General Secretary Karim Khan activate these cases so that we can pressure the occupation judge to be tried and provide protection for the Palestinian journalists.
Since the renewed Zionist assault on Gaza began on March 18th, Palestinian families were forced from their homes by relentless airstrikes, embarking on yet another journey of displacement. Here's yet another tragic story brought to you by our own Hossein Barkan in this report.
يا الله الرحمة من عندك يا الله يا الله من عندك الرحمة يا الله يا الله.
The tragedy of displacement in Gaza returns, bringing suffering to Palestinians who briefly hoped a ceasefire meant stability. Zionist forces forced them from their homes, then bombed the so-called safe routes, targeting displaced people with nowhere to escape as death pursued them across the strip.
The majority died when the tanks bombed us at the tent and they shot us with machine guns. In the morning they told us to get up and evacuate, and they threw leaflets and said the road was safe, but they shot at us, shelled us with rockets, and we got scattered in the streets. We beg for mercy, Allahu Akbar, and to Him is the praise. Many of our people died. Our daughters died and many children became orphans. We left them on the road. We don't even know what to do.
The resumption of the Zionist war on Gaza continues to claim lives on the roads of displacement. The lack of resources, continuous artillery shelling, and airstrikes deprived even the martyrs of their right to burial.
They forced us out, and as soon as we left, the tanks were already bombing and the planes were shooting at us. So many people were martyred and they were buried in the sand like nothing. There were no first aid, no Red Cross. People had no one to carry them. There were elderly people, children who couldn't move, and we had no idea where to go. We left without tents, without mattress, without anything. We don't know where to go or what to do. For God's sake, help us.
From the north of the Strip to the south, from the east to the west, the scene is the same, and the suffering is shared by all.
We fled from Deir, then from Deir we were displaced again. We were told to return in peace, but there is no peace. We became back thinking we would be safe. We were forced to leave south, and now they want to displace us again. We are not leaving. We will die in Palestine. I have lost my home, my car, my belongings and everything. But my homeland is Palestine. May God take revenge on them. Despite everything, we say Alhamdulillah.
The resumption of war in Gaza, the systemic policy of forced displacement against Palestinians, and the continuing prevention of aid entry into the Strip are all Zionist tactics to complete their genocidal campaign of ethnic cleansing. But their war against Palestinian steadfastness has shattered their arrogance and brutality.
Meanwhile, the Gaza government media office has sounded the alarm that since the start of March, or the attacks on the start of March, not a single one of the 15,000 and trucks, 8 trucks I'm saying, or 1,250 fuel trucks expected to enter the Strip has arrived. The consequences are dire, with 85% of the population cut off from basic food supplies and markets running empty. Gaza is teetering on the brink of famine.
The loss of 85% of citizens' access to essential food sources due to the shutdown of charity kitchens and food aid, along with the emptying of markets from basic supplies, threatens an imminent famine with severe consequences. The complete closure of crossings is a crime against humanity and a blatant violation of international laws, including international humanitarian law. We hold international legal human rights and humanitarian organizations fully responsible for ensuring accountability, while the occupation bears full responsibility for the catastrophic consequences of this illegal decision.
Still with the same file, but now turning to international reactions, the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor reports that since March 18th, occupation forces have been killing over 103 Palestinians and injuring 223 every single day. In just 1 week, relentless airstrikes have displaced more than 200,000 people, forcing them to flee once again. The observatory condemned the daily targeting of homes and tents, calling it a war crime, not a military necessity.
Israel has been killing more than 103 Palestinians and injured 223 others every 24 hours since it resumed its campaign of genocide through direct killing in the Gaza Strip on March 18. The targeting of homes, what remains of them, and tents sheltering civilians after more than 18 months of ongoing aggression constitutes a daily crime rather than a military necessity. This reflects an unprecedented escalation in Israel's policy of genocide against the Palestinian people.
Staying with international reactions, Algeria this time has strongly condemned the occupation's renewed assault on Gaza, calling it a blatant violation of the ceasefire. Speaking at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, Algeria's permanent representative, Rachid Bladhan, denounced the attacks as clear breaches of international law. He urged the global community to enforce the International Court of Justice's rulings and hold the Zionist entity accountable, demanding an immediate end to both the aggression and the illegal occupation of Palestinian land.
Algeria strongly condemns the violation of the ceasefire agreement by the occupying forces and the renewed aggression on the Gaza Strip, which has resulted in hundreds of casualties. It also denounces the repressive, discriminatory and settlement policies and practices aimed at eliminating the Palestinian cause, such as blockade, starvation, destruction, ethnic cleansing, forced displacement, collective punishment, and the annexation of Palestinian land. Algeria further condemns attempts to Judaize East Al-Quds and implement demographic changes aimed at entrenching an apartheid regime. It denounces the blatant violations of international law in all its forms and calls for an immediate end to the aggression on Gaza and the illegal Israeli presence in Palestinian territories, in line with the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice and the relevant UN General Assembly resolution.
Shifting focus to the escalating situation in the Middle East, this time in Yemen, where the Houthis have ramped up their attacks, claiming strikes on both Zionist military sites in occupied Jaffa and the U.S. aircraft carrier Harry Truman in the Red Sea. In retaliation, U.S. warplanes carried out 19 airstrikes on Houthi positions in northern Yemen, hitting Saada and Amran governorates. With tensions soaring, this latest escalation adds fuel to an already volatile regional crisis.
During the past hours, the missile forces, the drone air force, and the naval forces carried out a joint military operation targeting hostile warships in the Red Sea, primarily the American aircraft carrier Truman, which serves as a launching base for aggression against our country. The confrontation and engagement lasted for several hours, and as of the time of the statement, the armed forces continue to actively confront the aggression and responsibly address various developments and emerging situations within the operational area.
To another topical development now, but this time in Africa, where Sudan's army says it's back in full control of Khartoum, with General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan declaring the capital free. Key sites, including the airport and Republican Palace, are now in military hands, marking a major shift in the nearly 2-year conflict. Troops have tightened their grip on strategic areas, while Senior Commander Yasser Abdurrahman al-Atta insists there is no turning back until the rapid support forces are wiped out. Sudan will rise, he vowed, as the army pushes ahead. And for more updates on Sudan, we turn now to this report by Usama Yati.
After more than 2 years of brutal conflict, Sudan's army has seized control of the capital, Khartoum, dealing a decisive blow to the rival rapid support forces. The recapture of key sites, including the presidential palace and international airport, marks a major turning point in the war.
Now, your troops are in all combat axis. From the north in the national capital, from the Khartoum district in the north, They are moving currently to the south.
In a rapid offensive, Sudanese troops stormed the Republican Palace, a powerful symbol of state authority, where Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan later stood in triumph. The military also took Khartoum's airport, central bank, and key bridges, cutting off Rapid Support Forces supply lines. The Rapid Support Forces, which once dominated the capital, has seen its grip collapse after recent defeats in Al Jazeera, Kordofan, and even its Darfur stronghold. Al-Burhan vows to eradicate the rebellion entirely, ruling out negotiations for now.
Now, your troops are in all combat axes. From the north in the national capital, from the Khartoum district in the north, they are moving currently to the south.
But the humanitarian toll is staggering as the conflict left over 20,000 dead and 14 million displaced, with fears of more chaos as fleeing Rapid Support Forces fighters regroup. While this is a major victory for the army, experts warn the war may not be over, with the risk of guerrilla resistance still looming. For now, Sudan's future hangs on the balance.
And finally, in the Sudan file, the United Nations this time reports that over 20,000 Sudanese have been killed since the war between the army and the Rapid Support Forces erupted in April 2023. The conflict has displaced around 15 million people, deepening an already dire humanitarian crisis. The UN warns that if the fighting continues, the death toll will keep rising, and even more Sudanese will be forced from their homes. Moving on to another topical development, but this time in Europe, Russia says it shut down 9 Ukrainian drones overnight, or overnight, over Belgorod, 2 over Kursk, and 2 over the Black Sea. Meanwhile, Saratov authorities reported damage to an industrial facility, but no casualties. On the other side, Ukraine confirmed that Russia launched a massive overnight assault with 117 drones. Ukrainian forces say they intercepted 56 of them across the country using aircraft, anti-aircraft missiles, and electronic warfare systems. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has condemned Russia's latest wave of attacks, saying Moscow's launch of over 100 drones overnight proves it has no intention to seek real peace. In a statement on social media, Zelensky called the large-scale assault a clear message to the world, coming just after ceasefire negotiations. In contrast, the Kremlin confirmed ongoing communication with Washington, expressing satisfaction with the progress of talks between the two sides. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov stated that the Black Sea Security Agreement could be activated once certain conditions are met. This comes after the U.S. brokered separate agreements with Ukraine and Russia to implement a Black Sea ceasefire, halt attacks on energy infrastructure, and ease some sanctions on Moscow.
We continue our communications with the American side. As you know, these communications are ongoing intensively. Thanks to these communications, we quickly reached an agreement yesterday on a list of Russian and Ukrainian facilities subject to a temporary suspension of strikes on the energy system. We are satisfied with the practical and constructive development of our dialogue and with its effectiveness.
For his part, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has issued a strong warning to Russia, vowing an overwhelming response to any attack on Poland or any other NATO member. Speaking in Warsaw alongside Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, Rutte stressed that any aggression against an ally would be met with the full force of the alliance.
If anyone were to miscalculate and think they can get away with an attack on Poland or on any other ally, they will be met with the full force of this fierce alliance. Our reaction will be devastating. This has to be very clear to Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin and anyone else who wants to attack us.
Still with the Ukrainian file, Algeria has urged the warring parties in Ukraine to engage in serious and constructive dialogue for a peaceful and lasting resolution. Speaking at a UN Security Council session on the conflict, Tawfiq Laït-Koudri, a member of Algeria's permanent mission, emphasized the need for continued diplomatic efforts based on the UN Charter. He welcomed the partial ceasefire agreements and called for intensified negotiations to end the suffering in the region.
We welcome the encouraging partial agreements on a ceasefire, albeit circumstantial and limited. We urge parties to continue working on this track to put a final and comprehensive end to the hostilities. 2. We encourage parties to seize the current opportunity and engage in a serious and constructive dialogue to find a just, durable, and peaceful solution to the conflict, a solution that is based on the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and that takes into account the legitimate security concerns of both parties.
And now it's time to catch up on more stories making headlines with Marwa Belaiwer in the News in Brief.
At least 4 Nigerian soldiers were killed in simultaneous armed attacks on 2 military bases in Borno State, northeastern Nigeria. According to Reuters, security sources reported that Boko Haram and ISIS militants attacked an army base in Wadi Ruku, killing 4 soldiers. A separate assault targeted another military unit in the border town of Wolgo near Cameroon, with casualties yet to be confirmed. Thousands of Romanians gathered in the capital, Bucharest, on Wednesday to protest the December cancellation of a presidential election and the banning of its far-right front-runner from standing for office again. The European Union and NATO member, which borders Ukraine, will repeat its 2-round presidential election on May 4 and 18, after the Constitutional Court voided the initial ballot in December following accusations of Russian meddling in favor of far-right pro-Russian frontrunner Kalin Georgiescu. Braving pouring rain, hundreds of students and teachers on Wednesday blocked one of the main bridges over the Sava River in the Serbian capital to protest government corruption. The demonstration is part of a campaign of protests led by striking university students who are demanding justice after the roof collapsed at a train station in Novi Sad last November, killing 16 people. South Korea announced on Wednesday that 24 people have died in a series of ongoing wildfires, describing as causing unprecedented damage. Thousands of firefighters have been battling the blazes since the weekend in the country's southeast, where thousands of hectares have been scorched and an ancient temple has been reduced of ashes.
And finally, to a lighter note, Xochimilco, a UNESCO World Heritage Site in Mexico City, is battling pollution and urban expansion, but one man is fighting to keep it alive. For over 30 years, Omar Menchaca has navigated its canals, collecting trash and raising awareness about the fragile ecosystem that depends on clean water and balance. Here's Nabil Khazini with the story.
In the heart of Mexico City, Xochimilco is a treasure. Its canals, floating gardens, and wildlife date back to Aztec times. But now, it is under threat. In the middle of that, a quiet battle unfolds. Omar Menchaca has never thought of Xochimilco as just a place. It's been his second home for over 3 decades. Every morning, when the first light touches the water, he pushes his kayak into the calm canals of this UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's here among the ancient flowing gardens and winding waterways that Omar has found peace. But today, he's not just exploring, he's cleaning. Every paddle stroke is a step towards saving this fragile ecosystem.
Xochimilco es importante porque
Xochimilco is important because it provides great benefits for the city. It is a place that helps lower Mexico City's temperature by up to 2 degrees Celsius. It acts as a reservoir for rainwater, preventing flooding in the city, and it is also a place that helps mitigate the environmental pollution caused by the use of cars and industry in Mexico City.
Xochimilco canals are drowning in trash. Pollution, development, and overuse threaten to destroy what's left. And as the city expands, more pressure is placed on the wetlands.
If Xochimilco is not given the maintenance it needs, unfortunately there will come a time when Xochimilco will disappear.
The fight goes beyond the water. For centuries, the chinampas, floating farms near Mexico City, have been a vital source of fresh produce for local communities. These island farms have nourished generations, but now they too are at risk.
Other type of urbanizations came, most recently related to intensive tourism. The type of tourism containing many people in few places, making a lot of noise and generating a lot of garbage.
Xochimilco's future hangs in the balance. What used to be fed by natural springs now relies on rainwater. Too little, too late. Pollution from the city, combined with overdevelopment and illegal waste dumping, has created a toxic soup that threatens to suffocate this fragile ecosystem.
And with this, we reach the end of our news. Thank you for watching. Until next time, have a good one.